A security guard at the front gate of a production facility in Burbank, California, looked Keanu Reeves in the eye and told him his name was not on the list. Not because it was a mistake. Not because the system was down. Because the guard had decided, in the 30 seconds since the motorcycle pulled up, that the man on it was not someone who belonged on the other side of that gate. Black helmet, worn leather jacket, a duffel bag strapped to the back of the bike that had seen considerably more use than the bike itself. The guard, his name was Terrence Hollis, 31 years old, 14 months into the job, had a procedure, and he followed it. He typed the name into the system. He looked at the screen. Then, he looked back at the man on the motorcycle. "I don't have a Keanu Reeves on the access list for today," he said. The man on the motorcycle pulled the helmet off. He had a patient face. The face of someone who had been waiting for a long time in a lot of different places and had made a kind of peace with it. "That's interesting," Keanu said. "I own this place." Terrence did not visibly react. He had been trained not to react visibly. People said all kinds of things at gates, and most of the things they said were not true. "Sir, I'll need to verify that with the production office." "That's fine," Keanu said. So Terrence called the production office. 47 minutes passed before anyone picked up. What happened in those 47 minutes and in the 8 months that followed is the story I want to tell you today. There is a production facility on Alameda Avenue in Burbank called Northside Stage and Post. It sits behind a brushed aluminum gate and a guardhouse that was built in 2019 and still smells faintly of new concrete if the afternoon heat is on it. The facility covers 6 acres and holds 3 sound stages, 2 edit suites, a color grading suite, and a production office that runs on a scheduling system nobody fully understands except a woman named Pat Giraldo, who has been managing it for 11 years and could recite every booking in the last 7 from memory if she needed to. The stages have hosted commercials, independent features, 2 music video shoots for artists whose names you would know, and a handful of television pilots that went in different directions. Northside Stage and Post is not famous. It does not need to be. It is the kind of facility that fills its stages when it is supposed to, maintains its equipment carefully, and operates according to a reputation built entirely on reliability. The people who book it tend to book it again, and they tend to recommend it to people they respect. And this is how Northside has been operating for 16 years without advertising in any traditional sense. The gate was the entry point for everyone. Crew members with equipment manifests, directors arriving for pre-production walkthroughs, actors in call sheets, vendors delivering craft services, executives who preferred not to be in the lot for more than necessary. Everyone came through the gate. Everyone gave their name. Everyone waited while Terrence, or one of the 2 other guards on rotation, typed the name into the system and confirmed access. The system, in theory, was thorough. In theory, Keanu Reeves had a partial ownership stake in the facility, a fact that was not, as of the afternoon in question, reflected anywhere in the access management software, because the software had been updated 6 weeks earlier, and the migration of certain records had not been completed. Pat Giraldo knew this. She had flagged it twice. She had not followed up a 3rd time, because the 2 stages currently in production were running on 14-hour days, and she was managing 7 vendors, a broken HVAC unit in Stage 2, and a director who was convinced the color grading suite was haunted. None of this was Terrence Hollis's fault. None of it was especially relevant to the 47 minutes Keanu Reeves spent on a motorcycle outside a gate he theoretically owned. The relevant thing was this. Terrence had made a decision before he typed the name into the system. He had looked at the motorcycle, looked at the jacket, looked at the duffel bag, and already formed an assessment. The system had confirmed the name wasn't on the list, but the list wasn't the thing Terrence had consulted first. The first thing he had consulted was his own read of the situation. And his read had a history. You need to understand what Terrence Hollis had built in 14 months to understand why he held the gate the way he held it. He was 31 years old and looked slightly younger, with a stillness about him that people sometimes mistook for indifference, but was actually something closer to its opposite. A quality of attention so deliberate it had become invisible. He stood at his post with a professional ease that had taken him years to develop, and he wore the uniform the way someone wears something they chose rather than something assigned to them. He had grown up in Compton, the second of 4 boys, in a house where the door had been a real negotiation. His mother worked mornings at a dry cleaner on Willowbrook Avenue and evenings at a medical office on Century Boulevard, and she had an expression she wore on the days both jobs ran long that Terrence had spent years trying to understand. Not exhaustion exactly. Something more like the effort of staying upright in a wind that other people didn't feel. His father had left when Terrence was 9. Not dramatically. He was just less present across a period of months until he was not present at all, and the shape of his absence was something Terrence had measured against other men for years afterward. What they did, how they held themselves, what they protected, and what they let through. He had spent 2 years in community college, 3 years working overnight shifts at a fulfillment warehouse in Carson, and 18 months in a security training program run through the county that had placed him, eventually at Northside Stage and Post on Alameda Avenue in Burbank. He was good at the job. Genuinely, he had caught a vendor trying to bring in equipment that wasn't on any manifest. He had flagged a car that turned out to have a revoked parking permit tied to a prior incident on the lot. He had twice diffused situations at the gate, once with an agitated crew member, once with a delivery driver who had been given the wrong address, with a composure that his supervisor had noted in his quarterly review. He was also, in ways he had not fully examined, running a theory. The theory was not complex. The theory was, the gate exists for a reason, and the reason is that not everyone who arrives is supposed to be here. People with the right to be here look a certain way. They have paperwork. They have a name on a list. They call ahead. They arrive in cars, not on motorcycles, with duffel bags on the back. They do not show up looking like they came directly from a long stretch of open highway, with no one expecting them. The theory had served him well for 14 months. The theory had one problem, which was that it was not actually a theory about whether people had the right to be somewhere. It was a theory about who looked like they had the right to be somewhere. And those two things are not the same, even when they frequently overlap. The specific moment the theory had calcified into something Terrence hadn't fully questioned was 8 months before the motorcycle incident, when a man in a paint-stained work jacket had walked up to the gate on foot and asked to be let through to Stage 3. He was on the manifest, listed as a set decorator with a crew call for 6 in the morning. Terrence had called it in anyway, stood the man at the gate for 11 minutes while he confirmed. The man had not complained. He had waited. He had said, when Terrence finally lifted the barrier, "You're doing your job, man, no worries." But one of the producers had noticed the delay. She had said something to Terrence afterward, quietly and directly. The crew was already running late. Holding a man with a valid call sheet for 11 minutes at 6 in the morning for no reason he could articulate wasn't caution, it was something else. And she hoped he would think about what that something else was. Terrence had thought about it. He had concluded that he had been right to be thorough. He had not asked himself whether he would have called it in if the man had arrived in a different jacket. The afternoon was warm in the particular way Burbank is warm in October, dry and still, with a light that flattens everything slightly and makes the mountains to the north look like a painted backdrop. Keanu had come from a location scout north of the city. The motorcycle was his, because he preferred it for city driving, and the duffel held a change of clothes and a binder of notes from the morning. He had not called ahead because he had not planned to stop at the facility. He had decided to swing by on impulse after the scout ran short. He had not called ahead because people who own things do not usually call ahead to be let into them. This was a reasonable assumption. Terrence put his hand on the gate frame. Not the barrier itself, but the frame. A light gesture that communicated without aggression that the conversation was still proceeding. "Sir, the access list I have for today doesn't show a Keanu Reeves. Without confirmation from the production office, I can't clear you through." "The production office is on the lot," Keanu said. He said it with the mild interest of someone noting something that seemed relevant. "I understand. I'll need to reach them by phone." He picked up the desk phone in the guardhouse. The number rang. It rang again. Terrence stood with the handset in a way that communicated he had all the time in the world, and also that this was the procedure. Keanu put his helmet on the handlebars and looked at the gate. The gate was a clean, brushed aluminum sliding design, 12 feet tall, with the North Side Stage and Post logo in dark blue on a small plaque to the right of the guardhouse. Beyond it, the facility was visible. Stage 1's loading dock, a grip truck parked at a small angle near the door, a palm tree that had no real business being in Burbank, but was there regardless. "You've worked here long?" Keanu asked. 14 months, Terrence said, still holding the phone. "You like it?" Terrence looked at him. "It's a good post." "What makes a post good?" The phone rang distantly in his ear. Terrence kept his expression neutral, which was something he had practiced. Clear responsibilities, consistent structure. You know what the job is. And the job is keeping the wrong people out. "The job," Terrence said carefully, "is verifying access." Keanu looked at him steadily. Not challenging. The way a person looks at something they find genuinely interesting. "Those are different things," Keanu said. The phone rang. Nobody answered. Terrence set the handset down, waited the required count, and dialed the main facility line. That one rang too. "I can try the assistant production supervisor. That's all right," Keanu said. He said it simply, without irritation, the way you say something is all right when it actually is. "Take your time." He sat on the bike. He was not performing patience. He seemed to actually have it, the kind that comes not from temperament, but from experience. From having been in enough waiting rooms and slow lines and situations where someone with a procedure was working through it, and having decided, at some point, that being in a hurry about other people's processes was a waste of something you couldn't get back. The phone at the production office rang for the 4th time. In the guardhouse, Terrence Hollis stood with the handset and was aware, in a way he could not entirely account for, that the man on the motorcycle was not the thing he had expected. Pat Giraldo picked up on the 47th minute. She had been on stage 2, dealing with the HVAC company's technician, who had diagnosed the problem as a wiring issue that was above his certification level, and she had her radio and her phone on her at all times, but she had not heard the desk ring because Stage 2 was currently running a practical effects sequence that involved a considerable amount of noise. She heard Terrence's explanation. She said 3 words. Then, she was moving. Pat Giraldo was 53 years old, 5'3", and had the efficient movement of someone who had been solving problems on active sets for 3 decades. She was out the Stage 2 door and across the lot in under 2 minutes, and when she came through the small side door next to the guardhouse, she was not visibly alarmed. She was the kind of person who absorbed alarm into her posture and converted it into forward motion. She looked at the gate. She looked at Keanu on the motorcycle. She opened the gate. "I am so sorry," she said. "That's on me. The access migration, I flagged it twice and didn't follow up, and that's on me." "It's fine," Keanu said. "It is genuinely not fine, and I will fix it today." He smiled at that. The real one, slightly crooked, unhurried, the kind that doesn't announce itself. He pulled the motorcycle through and killed the engine. He swung his leg off and stood for a moment, stretching his back the way people do after a long ride, and then looked at the facility, the stages, the loading dock, the palm tree with no reason to be there. "How's stage 2 running?" he asked. "HESVAC issue. Practical effects are going. The director is happy, which is the main thing. And stage 1? Smooth documentary crew. They wrapped early. Good, he picked up the duffel from the back of the bike. I want to walk the color suite at some point. I heard the new monitor calibration is in." "It is. I'll pull the suite key." She was already walking. Terrence had watched this exchange from the guardhouse door. He was standing with the exact stillness he had been trained to maintain, but something underneath it was doing something he hadn't anticipated. A specific quality of reckoning, like the moment you test the floor in a dark room and find it closer than you thought. He had done the procedure. He had done it exactly as it was designed, and he had stood Keanu Reeves at his own gate for 47 minutes, because the access migration hadn't been completed, and the motorcycle looked like a certain kind of person. Pat passed within 6 feet of the guardhouse on her way back to the facility. She stopped. "Terrence, ma'am. The access issue is a systems problem. That's ours, not yours." She said it evenly, not unkindly. "But the 11 minutes with Carlos Vega in October, and now this, I want to have a real conversation." "Not today. Today is too much. This week." She did not wait for a response. She was already moving again, pulling keys from her jacket. Terrence stood at the guardhouse door. From across the lot, Keanu glanced back. Not dramatically, not with the weight of someone making a point. He simply looked. Then, he kept walking. The color grading suite at Northside Stage and Post was a small room, 8 feet by 12, lined on 3 walls with acoustic treatment panels in a dark charcoal fabric, with a single monitor the size of a dining room table and 2 chairs positioned in front of it. It smelled faintly of electronics and the specific staleness of a room that is kept very dark for long stretches of time. Keanu was in one of the chairs with his binder of location notes when Pat knocked and asked if he had a few minutes. "Of course." She closed the door. She sat in the other chair, the one usually occupied by the colorist, and for a moment she just looked at the dark monitor. "I want to tell you what I think happened out there," she said. "All right. The system's failure is real, and I own it. But Terrence, he's a good guard. He catches things. He pays attention. And he's been running a pattern for 14 months that I didn't address clearly enough after the Carlos incident, and today I watched it play out on someone who didn't deserve 47 minutes at the gate." "What's the pattern?" Pat was quiet for a moment. He reads people before he looks them up. Most guards do it. You'd be naive to think they don't. But some guards read the list first and their eyes second, and some do it the other way around. Terrence does it the second way. And the picture he carries in his head of who belongs on this lot and who doesn't, I don't think he's examined it as closely as he thinks he has. Keanu set the binder on the floor. "He's from Compton?" Pat looked at him. "You know that?" He mentioned it. Indirectly, a pause. "He was telling me what makes a good post. He said clear responsibilities, consistent structure, you know what the job is." He looked at the dark monitor. "That's not a job description. That's a philosophy. Someone who grew up with a lot of unclear things learns to love a clear line." Pat absorbed this. The Carlos situation, she said. The set decorator. Terrence held him for 11 minutes on a valid call sheet. Did he understand why? He thought he was being thorough. Was he? Pat looked at her hands. He was being something. I'm not sure thorough is the word. No, Keanu said. Neither am I. He was quiet for a moment. But I also don't think Terrence Hollis is a bad person doing a bad thing deliberately. I think he is a careful person who built a procedure to protect something real, and the procedure has a flaw in it that nobody pointed at directly, and so it stayed. That's generous. It's accurate. He leaned back in the chair. I know what it's like to build something to keep a certain feeling out, to decide that if you control the inputs well enough, you can control what gets through. It makes sense. It works, for a while, in a limited way. He looked at the monitor, the blank rectangle of it, dark and enormous. The problem is that it eventually keeps out things you needed. Pat was quiet. I'd like to talk to him, Keanu said, if that's all right with you. Pat looked at him for a moment. Then she stood up. I'll send him in, she said. Terrence came to the door of the color suite in the careful, deliberate way he came to anything that presented itself as a test. He knocked twice. He entered when told. He stood. Sit down, Keanu said. Terrence sat in Pat's chair. He had his hands flat on his thighs, and his posture was correct, and there was nothing in his face that was giving anything away. You followed the procedure, Keanu said. I did. That's true. You did. He looked at him. The procedure didn't cover the situation because the access records hadn't been migrated. That's a systems issue, not yours. Terrence said nothing. That's not why I wanted to talk to you. A beat. I know, Terrence said. Tell me what you were thinking when I pulled up. Terrence looked at the dark monitor. Then he looked at Keanu. I was thinking the motorcycle didn't fit the lot, he said. The jacket. The bag. The fact that you hadn't called ahead. He said it plainly, without defense. I was thinking, this person is going to tell me they belong here, and they probably don't. Before you looked at the list. A pause. Before I looked at the list. What would have changed if the list had been the first thing you looked at? Terrence was quiet for longer than the question probably required. Nothing, he said finally. My name wouldn't have been on it. So the outcome was the same. Right. But the procedure would have been different. The list would have told you the problem was a data issue. What you did instead told you the problem was the person. He let that sit. Those two diagnoses send you in different directions. Terrence looked at his hands. Carlos Vega, Keanu said. Terrence looked up. Set decorator. 6 a.m, paint on his jacket. Terrence was very still. Pat told me, Keanu said. How did he seem when you finally let him through? Fine, a pause. He said it was no worries. Do you believe that? Terrence looked at the floor. No, he said quietly. I don't. Neither do I. Keanu leaned forward slightly in the chair. A man with a valid call sheet gets held 11 minutes at a gate at 6 a.m. because of how his jacket looks. That's not nothing. Even if he's gracious about it, even if he's too tired to make a thing of it, that's 11 minutes where someone was told, without anyone saying it out loud, that there was a question about whether they belonged here. He looked at Terrence directly. You felt that question before. Terrence looked at him. Yes, he said. Tell me. Terrence was quiet for a moment that went long enough to become something else. When I started at the fulfillment warehouse, he said. Night shift. There was a supervisor, not a bad guy. Not deliberately, but every time I came in, there was a second of something. Like he was doing a calculation. Checking a box. deciding whether today was a day he was going to have a problem. He looked at the monitor. I knew what the calculation was. I knew what box I was in. I just never said anything about it because saying something about it meant making it official, and making it official meant I was the one with the problem. He stopped. I built my procedure to be the person who doesn't do that calculation, he said, to make the thing that happened to me at that warehouse impossible here. He paused. And then I did it anyway, with a different box. The room was very quiet. Yeah, Keanu said. That's exactly what happened. He said it without judgment, as a plain fact. The thing we're most afraid of becoming tends to find a back door. He paused. The fact that you can see it is the beginning of the thing being different. Terrence said nothing for a moment. What do I do about Carlos Vega? He said. Keanu looked at him. What do you want to do? Apologize, he said it simply. I don't know if he wants one, but I want to give it. Then do that, Keanu said. Specific, not sorry if it came across wrong. What you did and why it was wrong. Terrence nodded slowly. And the procedure, Keanu said. We'll fix the access system. That's on Pat and on us. But you have a chance to build a better version of what you were trying to build in the first place. He looked at him. A gate that actually keeps the right things out. What are the right things? Terrence asked. Threats, safety risks, people without authorization. He leaned back. Not people whose jacket doesn't fit your picture of who belongs. Terrence absorbed this. Can I ask you something? He said. Yes. Why did you wait? 47 minutes. You could have made it a very different situation. Keanu thought about this. I've been the person on the other side of a gate before, he said. A lot of different kinds of gates. The ones where you wait to see if you're going to be let through, those tell you something about yourself. About what you're willing to sit with. He looked at the dark monitor. And I wanted to see what you were going to do. Terrence went back to his post. He stood there for the remainder of his shift, 3 more hours, and he processed vehicles and pedestrians through the gate the way he had been trained to, which was to say carefully, professionally, with his hands behind his back and his face giving nothing away. But something had moved. It had moved in the specific direction of the list. He caught himself, twice, on the verge of a preliminary read. A van with mismatched plates, a crew member in clothes that didn't match what he'd been expecting, and both times he stopped. He pulled up the manifest. He looked at the list first. Both times, the person was exactly where they were supposed to be. At the end of his shift, he found Pat in the production office. I need Carlos Vega's contact information, he said. If you have it. Pat looked at him for a moment. Give me 20 minutes, she said. She did not say anything else. She did not make a moment of it. She went to her computer and found the contact sheet from the October production and wrote a number on a piece of paper and handed it to him. And that was that. Terrence called from the parking lot, sitting in his car with the engine off. Carlos Vega answered on the 3rd ring. The conversation lasted 6 minutes. Terrence said what he had done and why it was wrong, and why wrong was the correct word for it. Not careless or inadvertent, but wrong. Because he had seen someone through a lens he had not examined and had made that person prove themselves at 6 in the morning in the cold for no reason except the lens. Carlos was quiet for a moment after that. I appreciate that, he said. I actually appreciate that a lot. He did not say it was okay. He said he appreciated it. And Terrence thought about that distinction on the drive home, because the distinction was real and Carlos had understood it and used exactly the right words. At Northside Stage in post, Keanu walked through the color suite, checked the monitor calibration, spent 40 minutes with the grading system's new interface, and left notes in a folder for the technical director. He was back on the motorcycle by 5:15. He strapped the duffel to the back, put the helmet on, and rolled toward the gate. Terrence lifted the barrier before he reached it. Keanu slowed. Stopped. He looked at Terrence through the visor. "You called him," Keanu said. It was not a question. Something in Terrence's posture had changed slightly, not loosened exactly, but settled, the way a thing settles when it has done what it was supposed to do. "This evening," Terrence said. 6 minutes. Keanu held his gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once and rolled through. Terrence watched the motorcycle turn onto Alameda and disappear in the direction of the 5. The facility was going into its evening rhythm around him. Stage 2 wrapping. Grip trucks idling near the loading dock. The sky going the color that October skies go in Burbank, just before the light gives up entirely. He stood at the gate. He thought about the list. The access records were migrated fully within 36 hours. Pat made sure of it herself, and then she sent a facility-wide reminder about the update protocol and made sure every person at every post got the new log-in credentials before the next shift change. That was the easy part. The conversation she had with Terrence the following Thursday was not the easy part. It lasted 40 minutes in the small break room off the production office, with 2 cups of coffee that both went cold. Pat was not there to reprimand him. She had told him that at the start, and she meant it. She was there because something had happened at that gate that had been happening in smaller ways for 14 months, and she should have addressed it more directly after October, and she hadn't, and she was taking responsibility for that. Terrence listened to all of it. Then he told her about the warehouse. Not the whole story, not the way he'd told it in the dark of the color suite, but enough. Enough that Pat understood the architecture of the thing. Where it had come from. What it had been trying to solve. The problem, Pat said carefully, is that a gate isn't the same as a defense. I know that now. A gate is a filter. It's neutral. It filters for authorization, not for belonging. She looked at her coffee. Belonging isn't ours to decide. Terrence sat with that. He did not rebuild his procedure overnight. It is worth saying this clearly, because the story would be dishonest if it suggested that one conversation in a color suite and one 6-minute phone call had resolved something that had been forming for years. What happened was slower and less dramatic. He started to catch the preliminary read earlier, to notice it arising before he acted on it, and gradually, across months, the read stopped arriving first. The list started to arrive first, and the read started to become something he used to assess risk rather than belonging, and the difference between those two things became, over time, something he could feel. He thought about it differently by the spring. He thought about it as the difference between a door and a wall. A door opens for the right things and closes for the wrong ones. A wall closes for everything it doesn't recognize, which is a much longer list. He had been building walls. He started building doors. Carlos Vega came back to the lot in March, working the art department on a short film shooting stage 1. He and Terrence did not have a scene about it. Carlos came through the gate with his manifest. Terrence confirmed it, lifted the barrier. Carlos said, "Morning." Terrence said, "Morning." That was the whole of it. But it was a different kind of morning than October had been. In the summer, Terrence's supervisor nominated him for a staff development program run by the facility's parent company, a 6-session course on access and hospitality management that met on Tuesday evenings. Terrence went to all 6 sessions. In the 5th session, the facilitator asked the group what they thought the purpose of a security post was. Most people said to prevent unauthorized access. Terrence said, to make authorized people feel that they belong. The facilitator looked at him for a moment. Then he wrote it on the board. Keanu was at the facility twice more that year. Both times he came on the motorcycle. Both times Terrence had his name in the system. He had made sure of it, had checked it personally before every shift since November. The second time, in September, Keanu stopped at the gate before going in. "How are you doing?" he asked. "Better," Terrence said. "Still working on it." "That's the right answer," Keanu said. "The people who think they're done working on it are the ones I worry about." He pulled through. Terrence watched him go, the motorcycle moving slowly on the smooth lot asphalt. The duffel on the back less worn than it had been a year ago, or maybe Terrence was just seeing it differently. He thought about that. He thought about a lot of things, standing at that gate. It turned out that a gate, once you stopped using it as a wall, was actually a good place to think. "I keep coming back to 47 minutes. Not because of what it cost Keanu, he seemed, by all appearances, genuinely unconcerned. He sat on the bike. He watched the sky. He waited. 47 minutes in Burbank on a warm October afternoon was not for him a particularly terrible thing to endure. What I keep coming back to is what he said about it afterward. "I wanted to see what you were going to do." Because he was not waiting to be let in. He was watching Terrence run a procedure that was going to reveal something. And what it revealed was not a villain. It was a person who had built something intended to be a defense against a harm he had personally absorbed, and who had not noticed that the defense had started pointing in the wrong direction. We do this. I think most of us do this, in one form or another. We take the thing that hurt us and we build a structure around it that is supposed to prevent the hurt from happening again. And the structure works, mostly, until it doesn't. Until the thing we were defending against shows up wearing our own hands. Terrence called Carlos Vega from his car in the parking lot. He did not have to do that. Nothing required him to do that. Keanu had suggested it. But a suggestion from someone who owns the building where you work is not nothing, and it would have been easy and human and completely understandable to let it stay a suggestion and not a call. He made the call. I think that is the real story, not the 47 minutes, not even the conversation in the dark, the 6 minutes in a parking lot, calling a man he had wronged to say so, with nothing in it for himself except the chance to be more honest than he had been. That is hard to do. Harder than the conversation in the color suite, where Keanu was there and it was witnessed, and there was a kind of structure to it. The parking lot call was just him, and the phone, and the choice. He made it. I do not know what has happened to Terrence Hollis since. I do not know whether the thing he started in that parking lot continued, or whether life intervened in the way life does. I hope it continued. I think it did. I think that kind of thing, once it starts, tends to want to keep going. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known reputation for patience, humility, and the particular generosity of treating every person he encounters as someone worth actually seeing. If something in it stuck with you, drop a comment. Not what you think you were supposed to take from it. What actually landed. If you know someone who is carrying something like what Terrence was carrying, not because they're a bad person, but because a bad thing happened to them, and they built something around it that started pointing the wrong way, share this with them. Not as a message, just as a story. Subscribe if you want more. We're building something worth coming back for. See you in the next one.